This story takes place 1,570 years ago when the Roman Empire was under attack by various barbarian tribes. The barbarians and the Huns raided many Roman cities, causing massive destruction. The people wanted to escape, but they were trapped. On one side was the Adriatic Sea, and on the other, the Tyrrhenian Sea. With no other choice, they fled to nearby islands in the sea. While they managed to escape the attacks, these islands were not ideal for living. The land was soft and muddy, making it impossible to stand on, let alone build homes. But despite the harsh conditions, these people didn't just survive, they built one of the world's most powerful cities, Venice. But how was this even possible? How did they construct a massive city on islands where even standing was difficult? And that too, 1,000 years ago? The first people who reached these islands had nowhere to live. The muddy land was so soft that anything placed on it would start sinking. Some people even suggested going back to the mainland, but that meant certain death. The Huns and barbarians were waiting to kill anyone who returned. So, despite the difficult conditions, the people were forced to stay on the islands. These weren't just a few islands, there were more than 150 small marshy islands, all with the same unstable ground. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the refugees was sinking into the mud. In an attempt to save himself, he pushed his boat paddle deep into the ground. To his surprise, the paddle went several feet down and then stuck firmly in place. That's when they got an idea that would lay the foundation of Venice. Not far from these islands, in present-day Croatia, there were dense forests. The Venetians cut down massive tree trunks and transported them to the islands. They hammered these wooden poles deep into the muddy ground. Once the logs went 5 meters deep, they reached a solid layer of soil where they became firmly locked in place. To create a stable foundation, the logs were placed close together. Then the tops were cut flat and covered with wooden planks, evenly distributing the weight. To raise the city above water level, they placed limestone blocks on top. These wooden piles and stone layers formed a strong base for buildings. Amazingly, the logs did not rot because they were completely submerged in water, which preserved them for centuries. In fact, some of these wooden foundations have lasted for 1,000 years and still support Venice today. Once the foundation was set, they began building houses. At first, these houses were made of wood, but fires frequently broke out, so they switched to bricks. To keep buildings light, most were limited to 3 stories. A special limestone-based mortar was used between bricks, which provided both strength and flexibility. To prevent buildings from collapsing, iron rods were inserted through the wooden walls, holding the structures together. This method became so popular that soon, the islands were covered with homes. Normally, cities expand outward, but Venice grew inward, connecting the islands more closely. Initially, boats were the only way to travel between islands, but as population and trade increased, the islands moved closer and bridges were needed. For 500 years, Venice's islands were not connected. People used boats to travel from one island to another. But as the city grew and business flourished, connecting the islands became necessary. The first bridge was built in the Rialto district, the city's main business hub. Initially, it was a floating bridge, but it was unstable and people often fell into the water. Later, they built a wooden bridge, but in 1310, a riot led to it being burned down. Even after that, the wooden bridge lasted for 140 more years before it collapsed in 1444 due to overcrowding. Finally, a permanent stone bridge was planned. Using the same technique that built the city, 12,000 wooden piles were driven into the canal, and on top, a 10,000-ton stone bridge was built, the Rialto Bridge. It was so successful that many other stone bridges were constructed throughout Venice, making movement within the city easier than ever. Unlike other cities, Venice has no roads, only canals. Boats are the primary way of transportation, making moving goods across the city very easy. In normal cities, pedestrians and horse-drawn carriages shared the roads, causing congestion. But in Venice, pedestrians and boats had separate paths, making travel much more efficient. This unique structure helped Venice become one of the richest and most powerful cities in Europe. Look at the map. Venice sits at the end of the Adriatic Sea, which connects to the Mediterranean Sea, linking it with Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. During ancient times, the cheapest and fastest way to transport goods was by sea. Merchants from the Middle East and Eastern Europe could send their goods to Western Europe to countries like Italy, Austria, Hungary, Germany, and France by shipping through Venice. Venetian cargo ships played a key role in trade, making Venice a global trading hub. Over time, more people settled in Venice, and its population grew rapidly. As the population reached 170,000, a major problem arose: drinking water. Although Venice was surrounded by water, it was salt water, which was not drinkable. Unlike other cities, Venice had no natural rivers or freshwater springs. Initially, drinking water was transported from the mainland in large barrels by boats. But as the population grew, this was no longer enough. Venetian engineers came up with a brilliant solution: rainwater filtration wells. They dug deep wells and lined them with waterproof clay. Around these wells, they placed layers of sand and stone and covered them with tiles, leaving small holes for rainwater to enter. When rainwater passed through the sand and stones, it was naturally filtered before collecting in the wells. To increase water collection, houses had gutters and pipes that directed rainwater into these wells. Eventually, over 600 wells were built across Venice, ensuring a steady supply of drinking water. Unlike other cities, Venice couldn't build underground sewage pipes due to the soft ground. At first, people dumped waste into the canals, which created horrible odors. In the 16th century, Venice built open drains that carried waste into the canals. These drains were positioned above the normal water level, so only liquid waste flowed into the canal, while solid waste remained in the drain. Twice a day when the high tide came, the rising seawater flushed the drains, cleaning both the sewage system and the canals. Since seawater contains salt, it also disinfected the canals naturally. This 1,000-year-old sewage system is still used in Venice today. However, Venice is slowly sinking. Every year, the city sinks by 1 to 2 millimeters, a natural process caused by the soft ground. During winters, Venice experiences flooding known as acqua alta, where water levels rise, submerging walkways. Despite these challenges, Venice remains one of the most unique cities in the world. Over 6 million tourists visit Venice every year, while its local population has dropped to just 50,000. Venice's incredible engineering and survival story is truly one of a kind.